Okay, so in that last video, we talked about that mental model that Git has. The 4 phases: your working directory, your staging area, the local version of your repo, and the remote version of your repo. And we talked about how our commands move us from one step to another and how we can check the state with Git Status and Git Log. In this video, I want to talk about a few more practicalities that we think about as part of it is to motivate a bit better kind of why Git has this more complex setup. And I want to kind of give us a little bit of a preview of what it's going to look like when we want to work with other people, kind of satisfying that team objective of version control. But don't worry if that part doesn't make too much sense yet. We're not going to focus on that for this homework assignment. We're going to focus on that part kind of later next week when we talk about working in teams. So the first thing I want to talk about is this difference between the working directory and your staging area. So for example, let me, if I do a git status right now, everything's up to date. I've pushed everything from the last video to GitLab. If I go to edit products.java, and I noticed here that, in this file, I have the name of the previous instructor here. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete that and change this to Hunter's Awesome Product. I go ahead and save and quit. And then if I do a git status, just like we kind of talked about in the last item pool question, we should have this in our working directory, but not ready to be staged yet because we haven't staged it. So I can go ahead and I can stage products.java, totally fine. One thing, you could also do, if you want to stage all the files here, you can always do git stage dot, which is just this directory, and it will stage everything here, which is sometimes pretty helpful. But usually you want to, that works a lot of times, but you usually want to remember that you can stage specific files. Now, say I go back and make another edit to products.java. So let me say this product setup, we'll talk a little bit more about what this website's doing next week. It's about selling products that we are going to make up and contribute together. So Hunter's Awesome Product turns out to just be dirt. So maybe I should change this to Hunter's Not So Awesome Product. And if I save and quit here and do a git status, you'll see that products.java is both in the staging area and not in the staging area. So one thing to highlight is that Git does not work on the basis of files necessarily. Like it's not like you commit stage all of a file or none of a file. It works on a series of changes. We usually call these diffs. Like what lines did you change and how did you change them? And so it's entirely possible to only have some part of a file staged and another not, because really what it's doing is just staging this set of diffs. And it's actually kind of useful to think about. Git actually provides you a way to look at the differences between kind of these parts of this Git phases. So if you type Git Diff, this is going to show you the difference between what you have in your working directory and what's currently staged. So what this is showing is that so far since the last time you ran git stage, this is highlighting that I've added the word not so before the word awesome. It's kind of showing this like kind of, the terminal is trying to be really fancy with the highlighting here. Usually green means addition, red means deletion, and it's trying to highlight what's different. So I kind of deleted this line and added this line. Which is totally fine. One other useful command, another way of looking at git diff, is to see, well, what changes are in the staging area. And so there's actually a way of doing this. It's not showing me that I've explicitly changed, like it's not saying that, oh, the change was changing Josh to Hunter. But if you type git diff -- staged, this is going to look at the difference between the staging area and kind of what you're about to commit. And so here is the official change that I've added to my staging area. I've changed the word Josh to Hunter. And this is what I have in my working directory right now. It's currently adding not so. And I can go ahead and if I stage everything here, or I just stage products.java, it's the equivalent because I'm only changing one file. If I do git diff now, it's saying there's no differences. Well, why are there no differences? If I look at git status, I don't have any files in my working directory that I have changed. Everything's staged to be committed. And so now if I do git diff -- staged, it's going to show me, oh, this is our new change. It's kind of combined both the first stage and the second stage. It's really just taking the second one as like the new source of truth. Like this is the overall change, but it's really clever at how it actually kind of combines these. So there's that. Second practicality is commit messages. So I taught you originally, if you want to make a commit message, you say git commit -m, and then you type your message in here. This is actually, I think a lot of people use this because they like that it's kind of like a one-line thing, but I actually argue that this is pretty bad practice. And the reason it's pretty bad practice is it doesn't allow for a lot of the flexibility that Git and the popular websites GitHub and GitLab provide with your commit messages. So I'll show you what that flexibility is in 1 second. So there's another way of making a commit. Instead of passing in a message with the -m, if you just type git commit, it's going to open up Vim. You can set it up to open up Emacs if you like that, but by default it opens up Vim. And this is now an editor where you can type your commit message. Everything that shows up on above the comments, it kind of says here, any line that starts with a comment, the pound sign is going to be ignored. And so this lets you write a more descriptive commit message. Now, there's a general pattern that people use for their commit messages. The first line is supposed to be kind of a short description of what we're doing here. So maybe I'd call this update products, or I could maybe write it a little bit more, update old product to Hunter's product. And this is just like a 1-sentence description of what's going on here. Then Git allows you to write more. So you can imagine we noticed a bug, ticket number 391. If you have like a ticket managing system at your company, we noticed a bug where the old instructor was still selling products. We had to vote them out. It lets you write context here. And that context can be, why are you making this change? Like, what bug is it trying to fix? It could be an explanation of what's going on here. So maybe you did something really, really weird and you want your teammates to know, like, this is what this change is doing. But when you hit save and quit, it now shows you kind of that this commit, well, we've made this commit and now it has a more concrete message. Now, why do I like this style more? Well, all of the tools on GitLab and GitHub do a really good job of displaying them. So notice, if you go to GitLab right now, nothing's going to be there. Why is nothing going to be there? Why is that commit not there? Well, I didn't push it. Let me go ahead and push it real quick. Push. I'm going to send that up there. And then if I refresh the page, it first starts by showing me that first line. So notice that the commit message always just shows you the short description, that first line I wrote. And then they have this little ... which then you can expand to get more context. So this is a really fantastic way of communicating changes with each other. You write that one short line description to give a summary of what's going on, and then you write whatever you want here to give context. And now you never have to text your friend again, oh, here's this commit hash, and this is what I was doing here. You can just explain it here. And usually this style is a little enforced in Git. Like there's actually kind of a, you should only have so many characters in that first line, but you can write whatever you want in the rest to give that context. So I almost always will recommend, unless it's the simplest change in the world, like you're working on something as made up and contrived as this little Fang website, you should be using this full commit style. Because it is just so much better at communicating context. So I want us to try practicing a little bit more. Think about this idea of the phases of your changes in Git. So suppose we kind of, we're going back to this file 1 and file 2 example. Suppose I've made these 2 modifications, and I want to run a sequence of commands. So it doesn't have to be one command. You can write a couple commands that includes the changes to file 1 as one commit, and then changes the file, the changes to file 2 will become another commit. But I only want this to affect the local repository. So in item pool, it's going to be a free response question. type in what are the commands you're going to have to do this, and maybe give a short summary explaining what's going on. So let's go ahead and try this. So I'm going to go back to my repo here, and I'm going to make some empty files just to do this. So I'm going to touch file.txt, or sorry, I should call that file1.txt. And then I'm going to touch file2.txt just to get some files on the board. Okay, so I'm going to start by staging file1. You don't want to do git stage dot here. You don't want to stage all the files. Because this problem asked you to first make one commit that's just file1, and then another commit that's just file2. If we do this git status right now, I've made changes to both. And so I don't want to commit all of those changes quite yet. I really only want to commit one and then the other. So I'm going to have to explicitly stage, not dot, sorry, file1.txt. Then if I look at my git status, just before I commit, I see that, oh yes, I've staged file1. And then I could do git commit. And again, I'm going to use this kind of verbose syntax, add file1. I'm not sure why, but we are adding this file. Do whatever you want in these lines below. Then I can go ahead and repeat the process. If I want to make file2 its own set of changes, I can go ahead and git stage file2. And then I can go ahead and do a git commit. So git commit, and then add file2. In this case, I'm not going to add any context because this is just a made-up example. And again, if you went to look at GitLab, nothing would be there, right? I only said for this problem you want to change your local repository. So at this point, we're done. We finished making the changes. If we look at Git Log, we have 2 new commits at the top up here. Each one has its own hash. And it's telling me, kind of like, as I mentioned before, that origin master is where we think GitLab is right now. And we've made 2 changes since then. We'll go ahead and clear that. And now I want to go ahead and press push. And then I'm going to get an error. Now, what happened here? Well, while you're working on that item pool question, my evil twin, Shadow Hunter, went and contributed to this project. They added a program. They made a new commit. It wasn't actually 19 seconds ago. Let me refresh the page. It was about 4 minutes ago. They made a commit that said add spooky program. They added this spooky program.java, and it prints out boom. So this is a bit of a preview of what we need to do when we are going to be working with others. We're not going to spend a ton of time thinking about this context for this homework, but I wanted to kind of mention that this is a possibility. Like while you're working on something else, we made those beautiful commits, adding file1, file2. Spooky Hunter went and ruined everything by making their own commit, adding this spooky program. And they already pushed it. So this is like part of the official version history because they've pushed it to our shared repository. So one other step you're going to have to do, what's happening here is Git is mad at you because you're trying to push a set of changes that are out of date with respect to that remote. That the remote has new changes that you don't have yet. And it's saying, whoa. This is going to cause us a whole bunch of troubles. So you need to make sure that you're up to date before you're allowed to push. The reason it wants us to do this is to worry about the case when I'm making changes to the same set of files that Shadow Hunter made changes to. We're not going to worry about that today. We made non-conflicting edits, so this is actually going to be really straightforward to fix. We'll talk about that a bit more next week of how do we fix changes that are in conflict with one another. But right now, we're going to kind of just coexist peacefully with Shadow Hunter. The way we do this is it's the opposite of a push. We want to get the changes from the remote, from GitLab. So we do a pull. Pull says, give me all the changes that I don't have quite yet from GitLab and bring them into my version history. If I do a git pull, it does this thing saying, oh, you want to make a merge request. Sorry, not a merge request. It's making a commit message for this merge. What it's just saying is, hey, this is going to be a new kind of pseudo commit in some sense that's saying, hey, you have now pulled these changes that you didn't have before. We're kind of marking this kind of event where we've now pulled a new version of the repo. So now if I do Git Log, you can see my history is now nice and complete. It has kind of way back when we started off with initial commit. Then we had the update README. Then we did some random changes. Then I changed the products. Then in the meanwhile, Shadowhunter added a new commit while we weren't paying attention. But this happened chronologically before I changed any of file 1 and file 2. And so these got added on top of those changes. And that was kind of indicated, topped off with this merge commit saying, oh, we've merged things in. Again, we're not going to focus too much on this today and in this homework, but I just want to mention that if you ever need to get changes from the remote repository, that's what a git pull is for. You can always do git pull. It won't break anything if there's nothing. If you're already up to date, it'll just tell you so. And we'll talk about next time how are we going to handle this when Shadowhunter and Hunter are in conflict and they both change the same file. We're not going to worry about that. For the most part, we're going to coexist peacefully, where we can just pull and it'll be fine. I'm going to show you one last kind of fun thing that's not going to be super important for our class, but can be kind of fun. That Git log is all well and nice, but one of the things it could do is it actually has a lot of extra parameters to make it look a little bit better. And so you could do things like Git log decorate, all, and I'm going to say graph. And then it actually gives me a nice, prettier picture of what's going on here, of like when things are committed and where. And it also shows kind of this thing that we're going to be talking about next week called branching, where there's kind of a fork in the history where kind of one person did this and one person did this, and how that merge commit resolved that kind of fracture. So we'll talk more about kind of what this means and how this works next time, but I just want to give you a bit of a preview. But for your homework assignment this week, you're really just working alone. You're just in this world. You don't have a shadow version of you, thankfully. You're just working on your own kind of repo, and then everything will be okay. We don't have to worry about working with others. That's our focus next week. So hopefully see you in the Q&A session where we can talk about Git, because there's lots of exciting things with Git. And we'll see you next week where we talk about working in teams.